Start us off, Carter.
And now back to ruminations on winter solstice. As we reach the high point of the winter season, as all things frost and chill and slowly pass away, we will now take a long podcast of silence to ruminate on the nature of time's passage.
Cows are one of my favorite ruminants.
Shh. But actually, it's Carter and Kevin Explains Football again, folks. Carter here.
I'm Kevin and I like cows.
And ladies and gentlemen, we finally did it after too many goddamn weeks. It is finally the end of the National Football League regular season. We are on to the playoffs, gents and germs, and everything in between.
Aw, hell yeah. I'm
Yeah.
I'm optimistically excited. Um the season ended. I think this is probably my favorite part of the season is right after week 18 but before the conference rounds of games.
Hmm.
Cuz this is when you really it's like the conference games are most of the time teams that deserve it or like one team that really shouldn't have gotten in, but it's like you're going to get blown out.
Right.
This is upset city. This is where dreams become reality and reality crushes all the rest.
Yes. It is a time of hope, a time of excitement, a time where literally any of the playoff teams can do it, and you have to talk yourself into it. A week of, do we really need 7 playoff teams? And I'm excited to talk about the sort of exciting final week that stitched it all together for
Oh
us.
yeah, and exciting week, exciting couple of days, even
Oh,
post
yes.
football games.
Oh,
So,
yes. Because we're finally getting to my favorite part of the year, all of the off-season drama. Woo! But before we get to all of that, shall we start with our highlights for the week?
absolutely.
What
Uh
else could we possibly start with other than this?
oh yeah. Our sweet baby boy is playoff bound. That's right.
Woo!
Houston Texans pulled out a solid win over the Colts to finally beat them in the playoff ranking. Like
Yes, finally jumping past them to get
that
the
last
seed.
second leapfrog over them, they not only guaranteed themselves in the playoffs, but we'll talk about it in the lows. They're the
Mhm.
AFC South.
Yes, the Houston Texans have won the freaking division with a first year head coach, a
Yep.
rookie quarterback, and a team that everyone dismissed going into the season. Truly, like, there are a lot of different great stories this year, but I don't think there's as many feel good stories as, for the first time in forever, the Houston Texans are a feel good story.
Yeah, which
Within one
is
year,
insane.
they completely cleaned their culture out. They completely cleaned up their vibes. And in spite of injuries, in spite of setbacks, in spite of our sweet baby boy going down for a couple weeks, they
Hmm.
managed to pull it off. Who would have guessed last year, as everyone was clowning on them
Yeah,
for the great Lovey Smith
yeah. We we
of
quote we
2022?
quote Lovey Smith energy from this point last year, and look where we are now.
Yes, CJ Stroud looked characteristically phenomenal. Maybe one of the most beautiful throws I've seen in the
Oh,
entire year.
it was a
Um,
dime.
yes, a 75-yard touchdown pass. Truly, and this was the beginning of the game, folks. This is when you're like,
Yeah.
all right, are they sinking or swimming? Are they going to be able to handle the spotlight of you need to win this game? Like, it's not just like, hey, let's go out there and do our best as a team with low expectations. Now you actually have expectations.
Hmm.
Step, 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 pause, chuck it. And truly, an absolute bomb. I think it looked like it went 80 yards. It let at least like 90% of the work was done by the throw.
It
Truly one of the most beautiful passes I've seen all year.
On a scale of 1 to 7, that throw was an absolute dime. It was a 10 out of 7. That was
Absolutely. That was their first play from scrimmage.
yeah. It it felt really good to see like watching that throw. First off, felt really good because we've been kind of on the CJ Stroud train all season. Um,
Hmm.
And it felt really good to see that throw very early on. And the Colts have been competitive this entire year. Like, let's not sleep on the Colts getting the fourth overall pick, and that pick is out was out week 6, 7 ish, give or take,
Yes.
and they still kept a solid momentum going. Like,
Yes.
this is this is one of those games where, sure, Minshew blew it at the last second, and even Steichen let him know it, which was hilarious.
Oh,
Um,
yeah.
but
Look,
this,
this is a feel-good game for both
yeah,
teams, honestly, because both teams' stock is incredibly high. They absolutely nailed their coaching picks. They
oh,
have the
absolutely,
pieces around them. Like, this was a bit of a bummer ending for the Colts. They did have a chance to win it, and unfortunately, on 4th and 1, they dropped a sort of awkward pass from Gardner Minshew. I
yeah.
do feel bad for poor Goodson because at the end of the
It
day,
was
like,
that was more on Minshew than him.
yeah.
I'll be
And also,
honest.
like, I don't know, let's not overthink it. Maybe just run the ball. But yeah, the stock is incredibly high for both of these teams. But in terms of the story of the year, it is so nice to see the Houston Texans against, truly, against the entirety of math itself, pulling this off and getting to go to the
Oh yeah,
playoffs.
they have what is it? What was their record last year? 2 and 15 or something like that. Were they two
I
wins or
believe,
three?
I believe two, but I'm going to double check that right now. Uh, I don't think they've had more than 3 wins since what's his name's last season. Since Deshaun Watson's last
Yeah.
season.
Anyway,
Truly, it's been one of the worst stretches of football any team has ever played, and somehow they came out on the other side.
yeah, they
Yes,
came out
3 wins last year.
with over triple the amount of wins, with a rookie coach, rookie QB, and like what an underdog situation that they kind of started off the season to end. And in my opinion, not just throwing C.J. Stroud into the offensive rookie of the year category, but throwing him into the MVP of the year category.
Oh yeah, if he had played the full season, he would have absolutely gotten votes, and he would still probably get votes.
Yeah.
And you want to know what's actually insane?
What?
The last 3 seasons, 2020 to 2022, they had 11 wins. They almost doubled their win total over
Yeah.
this decade.
Which
I
is
don't know how else to sum up how big a transition this is.
insane that that happened. Also,
Yes. Great.
great game to watch too.
Oh, yeah.
It got the spotlight that it absolutely deserved. And their next, their first playoff round is against the Cleveland Browns, a Christmas Eve rematch.
Ooh.
Um, Here's the thing: Christmas Eve, it was Davis Mills. C.J. Stroud was out for that game,
Hmm.
so this is going to be like a bunch of the other same people were out, were in. So this is going to be seeing how good of a quarterback C.J. Stroud actually is,
Right.
and
And for me,
how
yeah,
much that defense learns.
yes. For me, this is like we've already talked about how cool a story this is. What if, after all of this, after the entire ugly, ugly Deshaun Watson saga, it is his replacement that beats his team? Again,
Right.
you couldn't write a more karmatically harmonious and beautiful thing if you actively tried.
Yeah.
Um, well done, Houston. Well
Also,
done.
I like the story of this that game, the Browns versus the Texans. The old
Hmm.
hermit coming down from his mountaintop, like keep Joe Flacco, the old wizard, the old sage guy. Like he's not that old, but compared to a lot of
He looks
everyone
older,
else,
that's for sure.
he looks aged. But
Hmm.
he like a Super Bowl quality quarterback leading this team into a very big solid run at the end of their season, and versus the young gun, the little
The little engine that
the little
could.
engine that could, the gunslinger C.J. Stroud. I feel like this like is this the oldest quarterback in the playoffs versus the youngest quarterback in the playoffs this matchup?
It might be. I know Stroud is a little older because of COVID
Yeah,
exemptions, but he is. CJ Stroud is 22. Oh, no, he's younger than I thought. Okay.
yeah,
Yeah, so it probably is by kind of default because no other rookies made the playoffs this year.
yeah,
Um, and yeah, there is a very real chance that Joe Flacco makes the Super Bowl, and I just don't. He was he wasn't an NFL quarterback anymore.
yeah.
He was
He was out of the
he was out of the
conversation,
league.
which is
He basically he was a punchline last year when he was playing on the Jets.
yeah, which is kind of crazy. How I mean that shows how inopportune the Jets were with their scheduling and planning for teams. And
Oh God, it's so funny.
because he just showed up and started winning games.
Hmm.
But yeah, I'm very excited to see this matchup. You
Yes.
can bet I'm going
Um,
to rush home from work to watch this.
oh yeah. Unfortunately, though, our CastPod friends, unfortunately, their dream of the Super Bowl will not come true because the New Orleans Saints were unfortunately eliminated
Yep.
from playoff contention because the Tampa Bay Buccaneers won.
They
However,
sorry, that their win annoys me because they won 9-0. That doesn't mean crap. The
that
Saints.
truly a shockingly horrific game. And again, another searing indictment on our friends in Carolina because that should have been an easy win. Like they were like, "Are you sure you don't want to kick us out of the playoffs? Are you sure you don't want to give
Yeah.
your rookie quarterback something to go out on? Like, are you sure you don't want to give him a positive note to end the season
They
on?"
held him
And they're
out.
like, "Nah, we're good."
They held him out for so many things. And then the New Orleans Saints, they played hard. 48
Yes,
to 17.
yes, a truly dominant performance from them. Um, and like people talked about this because there was some controversy at the end of the game, which we'll get into.
Yeah.
I so long for the days when rivalries had teeth, like the AFC North games, um, like Bills Dolphins. You can tell they really don't like each other,
Yeah.
and the NFC South, for all of its faults, all of those teams really don't like each other. This was like things are going to get very hard for the Saints in the next couple of months because it really does feel like sort of the bill is coming due. Like
Mhm.
they pushed their salary cap to its absolute limit, trying to keep this team together and trying to basically compete on the grounds of like,
Yeah.
well, we're in a bad division, like so we always have
Let's
a
get
chance.
something. Yeah.
The bill's going to come due soon, but for this 1 week, they really stuck it to a team they don't like. And even Derek Carr, who's had a truly awful year, to the point
Mediocre
where
at
his own
best.
teammates, yeah, where his own teammates were trying to fight him, threw for 4 touchdown passes.
Yes.
And the sort of creme de la creme de Oscar, as you would put it, for this entire game was at the very end of the game, uh, an inter-
Yes.
an interception was thrown basically around the 1 yard line. And truly, the Saints could have just taken a knee and ended the game. Jameis Winston hijacks the call,
Mhm.
hands it off to Jamal Williams, who scores his only touchdown of the year, damn near resulting in a fight. Arthur Smith got confrontational with the other team's coach.
Arthur Smith
And
got big mad.
yes, which I'm like, dude, if that's the, like, what, don't lose by that many points then. I don't know what to tell you. Um, yes, and that is what I mean. Like, the cattiness to run up the score. Again, if you're not going to make the playoffs, go for vibes. Get angry. Score a bunch of points. And also, it was like, I feel like, look, I don't really like James Winston for a number of reasons, but he seems to be very much liked in the locker room.
Yeah.
And it is telling that all of these like all these people outside the team were demanding like blood be spilt over this, demanding he gets cut from the team. When in reality, he was just doing right by Jamal, who hadn't really gotten a chance to
Yeah.
shine this year, and got his only touchdown of the year. Um,
Yeah. He Jamal I th- I would say the the kindness that it did to Jamal was probably the most bright side of it because he's been behind Alvin Kamara. That
right.
dude is he's proven he's still got some kick in him. And I'm not
Yeah,
talking
it's
about
very
physical violence. Um
But Tish, look, I will settle for the low bar that at least it was another grown man. Uh, but yeah, no, I'm again. This is the kind of like one, do right by your teammates, and two, like try to go out on a high note. Try and end on a statement.
Yeah.
And as we'll talk about as we get to sort of the consequences of the Black Monday, there very much were some consequences to that.
Mm-hmm.
Um,
And honestly, hot
me,
take.
oh,
I support them pulling a real fuck you play at the end.
right? Again, it's like you're not supposed to like these guys. We're not supposed to be buddy buddy. Like again, this sport was compared to bull baiting back in like the 20s.
Yeah.
Like let's stop with the hoity-toity like oh there's unwritten rules to the game. Like this is a violent sport played by meatheads. Let's just be honest about ourselves.
Yeah.
Um, yes, another highlight of the week, and this one really made me smile. Well, smile and frown for reasons that'll become clear. The Pack pulled it off. The Green
Yep.
Bay Packers win 17-9 and punched their ticket to the playoffs. It's kind of interesting. People talked about sort of as Aaron Rodgers gets himself kicked off ESPN. It's very interesting that last year they just had to beat the Detroit Lions to get into the playoffs and couldn't
Yeah.
do it. And they walked into a similar trap game where Chicago had all the motivation and vibes. Green Bay was a little antsy, and yet they pulled it off. And more importantly, they pulled it off in a way where you're like, yes, the team is going in the right direction. Jordan Love, once again, just looked in the pocket.
Mm-hmm.
27 of 32 for 316 yards and 2 touchdowns. The running game finally got going. Aaron Jones, who's been hurt the whole year, cracked 100 yards.
Yep.
And again, another, isn't it telling? One, two, three, four, 5 receivers got either 5 catches or over 100 yards. The ball's getting spread around. It's exactly what you would have wanted to see from Jordan Love to start this year. And yeah, you kind of now know, okay, he might be the guy. He's definitely worth continuing with. On the other end of the spectrum, unfortunately, a brutal game for the Bears.
Yeah.
I just look. They're going to do what they're going to do. They fired their offensive coordinator, but not their head coach, which is a weird choice. But I do think it's like you look at Justin Fields and how he played in this game, and you look at Jordan Love, and you kind of have to ask yourself, are we confident we can get him to that point within the next 2 years? And if the answer is no, then you probably have to do the right thing and give him another chance somewhere else, unfortunately.
Sorry, I scrolled way too far back on the Packers schedule for a second, and it was like last year, not even
Oh,
like
God.
this season. Last year, like 2022. I was like, I don't remember any of these games for a second.
All right, that's pretty funny.
Yeah, but no, it's Jordan Love has at least of this season submitted his ticket into I'm not worth firing yet. I don't want to say he's got that guaranteed spot locked in, but he's clearly proven getting rid of him would be a mistake. And I feel like that was a worry at the beginning of the season, is because Jordan Love is the third quarterback the Packers have had in our lifetimes. And
kind of wild. Institutional stability.
Yeah.
Isn't it crazy?
But and people kind of played him off, like, because they had Bofu for Brett Favre, elite level quarterback, and now
Yes.
Ponzi scheme fraud.
It's welfare money stealer
Welfare
from.
money, that's it.
Yes.
And then and then they had
he's on a
Aaron,
lot of welfare.
Mr. Into the Darkness, Rodgers.
Oy vey.
Yeah, that's its own entity.
And again, I think it's just very telling how teammates talk about Aaron Rodgers versus Jordan Love. If only for vibes, he's punched his ticket.
Yeah. And they've got a very young team. I think one of the youngest in the league, and it is filled with upper mid-tier talent that they can only train themselves to get better.
Right.
There's some teams that they put all their money in their star power players. I'm looking at you, New York Jets. And
Hmm.
then there's teams like this where it's just like, how many Packers could you have named before this season started?
Right? Yeah, and
And
that's like the nice thing about this team. It doesn't feel like they've. This doesn't feel like a ceiling. This isn't like with Daniel Jones, where you're like, well, this
yeah,
is probably the best they're going to be able to do with him.
yeah,
It feels like there's room.
there's room for growth, and they've had some pretty solid, like, big moments. They've beaten the Chiefs, the defending champions. They've beaten the Lions, one of
Hmm.
their two times, who are their division leaders. They've held their own against some pretty solid teams. So it's like this is kind of like a like I'm trying to think of the best way to describe it. Like the Texans is that new generation, like they're leading the one like the new
Right.
generation, and then you have people like the Chiefs, which are like the older generation, and the Packers are that mid generation of that in
Mm.
between of this like I think I described it last week as like a passing of the guard of the quarter like of the generational quarterbacks
Yes.
like that has been happening over the last couple of years, and the Packers are kind of are in that middle spot where it's like a very big blend of underrated young people and underrated returning veterans.
Right. And to your point there, even just talking about like the old guard quarterbacks, it's like, okay, at sort of like the table, the pantheon, as it were, of NFL quarterbacks, it's like, of like the eight spots, I'm like, okay, Patrick gets one, Josh gets one, Lamar gets one. Those are three at least. And I'm like,
Hmm.
how many would I put ahead of Jordan Love? Like, how many would I say get that spot before Jordan Love?
Yeah,
Dak, maybe. I, I Hurts probably. Stafford probably. Like, he's already worked his way into the conversation as
yeah,
like one of the guys. And I think like there was still a lot of work to do this year, honestly.
yeah. They have room for growth. They have a lot of room for growth, but it's
Hmm.
like think about it though. Like there is only 32 starting quarterback positions. Granted, about 50% of them are now technically backups because their starters got hurt at some capacity.
Because
Uh,
this year was a bloodbath.
it was a very big bloodbath. And first off, think about just how the conversation changed over the course of this year. Because you didn't really count Bryce Young and CJ Stroud in because they were rookies, same with Anthony
Hmm.
Richardson. You kind of put, like, you would put Jordan Love at the bottom of the tier. You know what we should do for next season? We should
Yes.
rank all the quarterbacks week like going into week 1, and then we should rank all of them leaving week 18.
Completely agree. I want it in our notes as soon as possible. I love doing silly, nerdy stuff
Yeah.
like that.
But
Um,
yeah, like Jordan Love is I mean, CJ Stroud has done it, but he was also a rookie. He had nothing really going for him. Jordan Love is a 3-year veteran who's
mhm.
played back up to Into the Darkness, and now he's playoff caliber. Can't deny that. Sure, it's the wild card
Mhm.
round, and they earned that like last spot, but playoff caliber,
Oh
and
yeah.
it'll be interesting to see how this goes. Like he's got promise, and his team's got promise, and
Yes.
now the question is, do they draft smart? Do they try and make a bold trade or two for maybe like a little extra talent on their side?
Right. It is curious, as excited as I am about them, it is an interesting window because, like you said, he's already a 3-year veteran.
Hmm.
So the question of a contract is going to come up sooner than it will for other guys.
Yeah.
So there is the question of like, yeah, you're right. Does the win is the window now? Do we have to smash do we have to smash the glass door and get through
Hmm.
immediately? Unless you feel confident you can get him at less than
Yeah.
what the going rate for quarterbacks has been, which is each one's resetting the market.
Yeah. I don't think he's of the caliber to reset the market,
At least not
but
yet.
not yet. But as of right now, he is of the caliber to earn another contract with very little push, I guess.
Yes,
Like
that's a good way of putting it.
they're not. I feel like in the Packers like offices, they're all sitting around the table right now, going, "Yeah, so we're offering Jordan another contract, right? Right?" And it's just like we're like in the imaginary world where money's no object. It's just like, "Yeah, we will offer him another contract." Yeah,
Right, right. Yes. Speaking of young guys stepping up, a note you put down is we had a couple pretty big record-setting years
yep,
for rookie players.
yeah. I feel like if we're talking about highs, we should also talk about rookie breaking records.
Yes.
Laporta, the tight end from the Detroit Lions, who unfortunately I think is out
Yes, I
for the
believe his
playoffs.
injury is for at least probably the playoffs, if
He
not the first
he
few
was
games.
in he was in the walkthrough, but that doesn't mean he is going to be playing.
Hmm.
He got a pretty nasty hit, um, but he still has a chance. He's not completely ruled out, and I just heard some sort of grumble behind me, and that's concerning. Um, but he broke like the most touch. Him and Jameer Gibbs broke like they both got 10+ touchdowns their rookie season, which is ridiculously high, and like I think 100+ receptions, which is insane.
Yes, he broke the record for most catches by a rookie tight end. Actually, a banner year for tight ends, a position that's famous for kind of famous for being very hard to translate to the NFL. Like it takes time
Yeah,
because basically you're learning two positions. But yes, his 86 catches was a new record. He's in a company of like Mike Ditka, and basically that's it. Meanwhile, Dalton Kincaid was about, I believe, 7 or 8 catches off
yeah,
and shattered the record not only for Bills tight end catches in general, but also rookie pass catches by any. Yes, Gibbs also got 10 touchdowns. It's actually really impressive how well Detroit is capable of balancing two running backs because David Montgomery also had 1,000 yards.
yeah.
Um, and Puka Nakua stayed in the game just long enough yesterday or Sunday to finally break the rookie wide receiving record.
Yep,
Truly, another one of the feel good stories. He ends the year with 105 catches, 140 or 1,486 yards, which are ninth and fourth in the league, respectfully. And suddenly, and kind of really did change the vibes of the Rams. If you want an
yeah,
explanation for what happened with the Rams, it is guys like him showed up at just the right moment to rally the old guard.
yeah. It's kind of interesting. Like I feel like the Rams have probably the biggest generational gap between some of like their veterans and
Mhm.
their young guys, and they've. Uh, I feel like that's like a perfect merge. Like it's like him just going to like Matt Stafford. I know, just throw the ball. I'll figure out how to get there. Like between him and Cooper Cup, the Rams have a solid opportunity for the playoff season.
Yes, I again the Rams are kind of outside of our Packers Texans vibes. They've kind of become my favorite team of this year, and I've kind of gotten radicalized into thinking not only is Matthew Stafford still one of the 5 to 6 best quarterbacks in the NFL, I think he might have just been better than Aaron Rodgers his entire time, but he was on a worse franchise. Like I'm
Yeah,
straight up like I hate to say it, but he does all of the same crazy arm angle stuff that Rodgers did. He's never been weird. He's never been a bad teammate. He's
he's
gutted
never
out
been
like
weird.
several injuries that really should have been season enders, but he just played through them. And also, I don't know, he's just kind of chill and fun.
Yeah,
And now he gets to be, he gutted it out in LA or Detroit for years and did his best and got them to the playoffs a couple times. And now he just gets to hang out in Los Angeles and be like a sort of pseudo celebrity. And, you know, he's got a Super Bowl. He's
hmm
got as many Super Bowls as Aaron Rodgers. It's worth noting.
yeah, which is hilarious.
Yes.
Uh,
Shall we move on to? So we are keeping this category in for the playoffs.
Yeah,
Wait, sorry. This is still
still
week
week
18.
18. Yep.
The don't sleep on game. Mine is fittingly enough. Los Angeles Rams versus San Francisco 49ers. This was a quietly fun game that kind of was nestled into. It really didn't decide anything other than the Rams' placement, but a lot of things decided that in terms of they already knew they were in the playoffs. They just weren't sure what seed they would be.
Yeah.
Um, and yeah, this ended up being kind of a all backups game, and kind of like a fun little tight game. The Rams end up winning 21-20 in the final minutes. Carson Wentz,
Yep.
who again can't be overstated enough. We had a joke
Carson
in one of our
Wentz.
fantasy leagues that you could cash in points and force someone to start Carson Wentz. But then he was just not on a team for the entire season until the 11th hour when there was some worry about Matthew Stafford's lingering finger injury. Um, he marches the team downfield. He marches the team downfield and basically for a calls his shot for a rushing 12-yard rushing touchdown, and wins the game for the team. A weirdly pleasant, nice moment in the Carson Wentz story. And on the other end of the spectrum, Sam Darnold, one of the other great, but I can fix him quarterbacks of our generation. All the physical talent in the world, but just missing one little thing to get them over the top. And yeah, he also does perfectly solid, throws a touchdown pass. Um, there was the fun little game of we need to get Puka Nacua this record as quickly as possible, then drag
Yep.
him the fuck off the field before he gets hurt. Just kind of like a nice little game. I'm glad both teams were on the same page of like, why don't we both do all backups? Wouldn't that just be nicer for everyone? Wouldn't that just be a nice feel good story? And yeah, Carson Wentz and Sam Darnold, two guys who I kind of want to have empathy for. One slightly easier than the other. Kind of just getting their day in the sun, having a sort of low consequence football game.
Yeah, it's. I feel like that's something I want from the off season, I guess, and
Mhm.
or like maybe not off season, but like the eliminated teams from playoffs is play the people for just a fun game. And I know my ideas for this kind of stuff are it's like, what if they get hurt? These people are worth millions of dollars, and it's like you're not wrong, but they're also worth millions of dollars. If you throw in just the middle of like the playoff weekend, just a fun game for people to they don't have to watch, but like it could be the pee game where you go and pee.
Mhm.
Play people's backup so you're not losing your $1 million talents and you like to anything stupid. And just put in some fun matchups. Like give me give me like a Jets versus Giants game. They're both just the same level of mediocre, but just really have go wild with their like play calling and stuff and going for bold kicks and stuff.
Right, right. Would you like to share your sleeper game of the week?
I said, we mentioned it earlier, Atlanta versus New Orleans. Now, I know what you're thinking. Huh, that's not close. Typically, Kevin picks like a close game that to go off of. This was a good old fashioned rivalry beatdown.
Oh, you do emphatically love to see it. Except
It's
that one other one this week.
it arguably got some. Yeah, there was another one this week that I do not want to mention that much, but it
And I'll
happened.
have the courtesy not to talk about it.
It happened, but this score differential was worse. So that's why it's more important in my opinion. Um, it was like very. There was some scumbag moves used by the Saints. Allegedly, Jamal Williams. They're looking like they're gonna do a final like the victory formation, but it's a run. Complete audible by the entire team, and it's just like I love that kind of stuff. I think that's because I respect the gamesmanship, the sportsmanship of going. At least like we're not gonna put rub it in their faces. You're grown men playing a children's game. If you can't get over that, why
Right.
bother? And against a divisional rival, too, check. There was technically stakes in this game. Sure, it was dependent on a dog shit game like Buccaneers versus Panthers, but there were stakes in this game of if you win, you're in. You could be in the playoffs.
Right. It is
The
truly
Fal,
insane that all three of the four NFC South teams could have made the playoffs this year.
yeah,
One of them could have made the wild card if some things went differently, but
yeah,
fortunately, God was nice enough to only make us have to endure one NFC team, South team.
yeah. But it's like the Saints were like, oh, we couldn't. It feels like they played oppositely. Like the Falcons were like, we don't have to try that hard because a lot of things need to happen for us to get it. And then the Saints are like, if the Buccaneers screw up, we're in. We're going to play hard the entire 60 minutes. And they did.
Mhm.
And I loved that.
Yes. Um, shall we get to the lowlights of the week?
Sure.
Perhaps the lowest light of the entire week. Um, the Jacksonville Jaguars, who at one point were 8-3, had everything going for them, were
Yep.
the number one seed, and had a 99% chance of making the playoff, were eliminated after a 28-20 loss to the Tennessee Titans. Um,
Insane.
kind of Yes, kind of a game that was kind of a microcosm of everything that has gone wrong this entire season for them. The defense, despite having robust and exhaustive resources put toward it, just not being able to stop anyone, even a team with as many holes in it as the Tennessee Titans. Um,
Yep.
Derrick Henry having kind of his Derrick Henry having one last hurrah, going for 153 yards and a touchdown.
That felt a
Um,
little bit like a goodbye game.
Oh yeah, hey, he's very much like because he like spoke on the PA afterwards, like thank you everybody, goodbye. Um, Uncharacteristic, difficult turnovers from Trevor Lawrence, who really not all of this is his fault, but it really is starting to become a problem. Offensive line unable to stop a cold, inopportune mistakes at inopportune times, and ending on a goal. Ending on a going for it in an inconvenient time and blowing it. A turnover on downs where they should have made it into the red zone. This has been a truly terrible red zone team for a while now. Kind of just everything that's gone wrong, and it's like a lot of the stuff that made them charming last year is now starting to look kind of gross.
Mm-hmm.
Like, why did you give why did you give Zay Jones and Evan Ingram that much money? Why did you draft Tank Bigsley when you already had Tre'Davious White? Why did you draft Trayvon Walker when there were like two other much more high profile defensive ends in that draft? Just the mistakes are starting to pile up, and they are actively holding this team back. Again, Trevor Lawrence needs to play better. I think he's a little too careless with the ball. I think there's like a pro and a con to arm arrogance, and he seems to end up on the con side more than he should.
Mm-hmm.
But at the same time, if you can make a 2-minute montage of people dropping obvious touchdown passes, um, like clearly that is sort of the core problem. Like the talent around him is just much worse than we anticipated going in, and they are going to have to do a pretty dramatic overhaul of the system
Yeah.
to make sure this truly a cakewalk.
It should have been a
To
cakewalk.
the fact that they are not in the playoffs and the Buffalo Bills are is actually kind of insane when you stop
Mm-hmm.
and look at just raw odds.
Yeah. Well, their DC is out. I believe their DC has already been fired. The Jaguars.
Yes, so at least there was one consequence. And I look, we love Dougie P here, but I truly a
I
jaw-dropping collapse from a coaching
Yeah.
standpoint.
Very big collapse. I think Dougie P is at his strength when he is considered an underdog. And the Jaguars being in that division and doing so like they were underdog considered last year because they've been known to get 2 years in the very recent future of first picks overall
Mhm.
by earning it. and it's like they were kind of like this is the definition of a wild card team last year. And then
Right.
there's like they're all of a suddenly in one of the most competitive divisions. And
Yeah. They found out real quick they were not built for this.
yeah, it was I I feel like there was a lot of basics that were falling apart and stuff. And they weren't prepared. They were prepared to be in one of the worst divisions at the beginning of the season, but they weren't prepared for everybody to show up and ball out the entire season. Plus or minus the Titans, I don't know. They're a little all over the place,
Right.
but like it's I think because based off of Colts and Texans track records, they theoretically shouldn't have been fighting for that spot. If even if you go back to like week 5, Colts and Texans should not have been technically fighting for the division spot by the time we got to this point. And maybe the Jaguars just got cocky. They got lax. They they got the worst team in the division for their final game, and they have all like that divisional spot all but locked up.
Yeah, true. Like, I mean, look, the talent again. I This team is not as talented as we thought, but when you're 8-3, you really probably talent shouldn't be the main problem. Like, you have enough of an advantage. You should probably be able to grind it out. And like,
Yeah,
yeah, a lot of the wish casting was based on the idea that the whole division would suck this year. But like, yeah, at some point it's like, no, it's an organizational failure.
yeah,
At
no,
some
it's
point,
a
if you
huge
have
failure.
8 wins, can you not get 3 more? Like, they got 1 more win after that.
Yeah,
Hold on, I'm just gonna pull up because I want to look at their schedule and see how wrong it went. Okay, so let's see. So after the Bills win, they win 3 straight. They beat the Texans, and it's like, okay, it's locked in. Since then, it was loss, 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 win, loss. Their final one, two,
they lost their
1-5 down the stretch.
yeah, and the one team they beat was the Carolina Panthers, which I feel like means nothing.
In a game where their owner threw a drink, and again, I was saying like they really should just pull Stroud and be like, look, we'll do right by you
Yeah,
next year, we promise.
yeah, or Bryce Young, you mean? But also
Oh, whoops.
the game before their big losing streak, they won 24-21. That was not a solid win. That was a field goal.
Right, right.
And yeah, game changers.
Yeah, absolutely brutal. Um, Long off season in mind for them. Another low note is Bill goes out on a low note. So the New England Patriots lose a 17-3 game. The Jets win their first game against the New England Patriots in 15 games. Truly a bummer that like it was an aesthetically pleasing game because it was snowing, but the actual content was absolutely disgusting. Trevor Simeon, 8 of 20 for 70 yards. Bailey Zappi, 12 of 30 for 88 yards. Brees Hall, one man switch. He's starting to get into the Saquon space shockingly fast. 37 carries, 178 yards, and a touchdown. But they didn't give him enough carries to get over 1,000 yards for the season. I do believe he was 6 yards short. I do believe that he is maybe the best running back in the league, but that's tough. Um, yeah, just kind of a weird bummer of a game, and it really is like, man, Bill is really going to go out on this one. Again, I've said before, like, no one wants to be the old man rattling the sword on his throne as the like revolution
Yeah,
kicks down the door, but like it always ends up that way. Don Shula's end wasn't too, gracious either. Like it usually ends like this. It's just tough to see it happen live.
yeah. No, it's kind of it's like the fall of a giant,
Hmm.
and you you like it, but you also hate to see it.
Yeah, it is interesting. It is like, and there's already some talk about who might replace him in the scenario where they do end up moving on from him. Um, but I I guess the question is, do you just blow it all up? Do you just go complete culture change? Because there is one option that we will discuss that's coming up, where there is an idea that you can keep the Patriot way without Bill, and a part of me just thinks, man, you might just have to, maybe you should just go in the exact opposite direction.
Yeah, it's
Um,
you've set yourself up for rebrand, like pretty damn clearly, and you just gotta commit. Alrighty, possibly lost Carter.
oh no, I'm here.
Okay, I always say that, and then it's like, let's find out if I actually did or not. Next point: Dolphins lose the division. Big yikes.
Another kind of quiet collapse. 3-game lead on the division, lose a Titans, where you're up 14 late in the fourth. You lose to the Ravens, where it isn't even close. In this game, the first quarter, the Bills were asking you to take this game. Again, I hate to be a homer, but I don't really blame Josh for either of the interceptions. The first one was Gabe Davis and him didn't connect on a what's the word, option route, which I don't know why you're still running option routes with Gabe Davis. This is the fourth time this has happened. It's just
Yeah.
the first time it's been an interception. It cost us the Eagles game. The offense was sputtering. The defense couldn't stop you. You were running it down. They had 100 rushing yards going into half. An absolute backbreaker to end the first half. The Bills have a chance to score a touchdown, but get tackled inbounds and run out of time. Truly, it just felt like this was going to be the story of the season for the Bills, where it's like, and they'd already gotten a playoff spot, so it wasn't the end of the world, but like, it felt like the problem the Bills had early in the season, where you have costly turnovers early, and then you just run out of time to get a lead, even though you're like running all over them. They give up a punt return for a touchdown, and just like the entire second half, punt that gets returned for a touchdown, punt, interception, end of game. They are going in. If it were not for a team that we talk about on this show a lot, they would be the coldest team going into the playoffs, which is fitting because they're going
Mm-hmm.
to have to play the Chiefs in sub-freezing temperatures. Um, Truly, what a reversal of fortunes. And I'm very curious how the Dolphins proceed because, again, the sort of memery of it all and the Mike McDaniels of it all is fun when you're winning. But,
Mm-hmm.
like, is it going to be nearly as charming when you blew a huge division lead over a rival who, again, these two teams really don't like each other? Um, like, it gets very nasty very fast for these two teams. And yeah, Christian Wilkins, for some reason, keeps grabbing Josh Allen's genitals. This is like the third straight game this has allegedly happened, and I don't know why he keeps insisting on that. There are other ways to psych someone out.
Yeah.
Um, but anyway, yeah, so they kind of, the Bills somehow, against all odds, being the 11th seed after that Eagles loss, are somehow now the second seed in the AFC because the season is ridiculous and dumb. Um, and are going to get at least 2 home games in the playoffs if they win out.
Yeah. No.
Meanwhile, the Dolphins are now on the road the entire time.
Yeah. I think it's a bigger impact of putting the Dolphins on the road than putting the Bills on the road. Cause
Right.
Bills on the road, it's like whatever. Um, but the Dolphins, they practice in Miami. They play half their season in Miami, especially when it's those colder months where it might just be me, but cold hits differently. If you get hit in the cold versus getting hit in the warm, it hurts a lot more, and you slow down a lot faster. And like look how the New Year's Eve game went. They lost 56-19 in cold weather climate or colder weather climate than Miami. And they're playing at the Chiefs, who I believe it was said to be one of the coldest games ever.
Yes, it is actually like they are in the middle of a blizzard. It's actually really rough out there for Kansas City. There is kind of a shelter in place right now.
Yeah, no, they're getting hit hard, and it is going to be ice cold. So, hold on one second. Let me see. Yeah. All right, you ready for their high and low for the weather for is it a Sunday game or a Saturday game? Saturday.
Hit me.
Saturday. High 8 degrees. Low -2.
Oh, and I don't even want to know what the wind chill for that is.
Ga- um Game time, it is predicted to be around about 6 degrees going downwards. So they're gonna start very cold, and with the amount of rain and stuff that's happened to Florida this last week, I feel like if you're practicing inside,
Mhm.
and that's going to be temperature controlled conditions. And I'm no genius, but I don't think you can make it 6 degrees.
Yeah, that game has a chance to be a real.
It's going to be the
I you know
frostbite bowl. That's what that's going to be.
yeah, that game is going to be brutal in terms of like two teams who are going into the playoffs super cold in cold temperature, and like you've listed it in. You have some feelings about this game. I
Yeah.
think it could be a really low scoring affair,
Oh
but
yeah.
we will talk about that as we move on.
We'll talk about it.
Um, So our final low light, Black Monday is here, the time of year where coaches are finally moved on from a couple big high profile ones
Yeah.
this year. Let's start with the biggest one, Ding Dong. Well, not the biggest one, but the
The
sort
biggest
of
ding dong,
most
the guy who
memed one.
deserved it the
Yeah.
most.
Yes, Arthur Smith is fired. And look,
Thank God.
there's been a lot of interesting discourse about this because it really felt like this team was still technically in a rebuild. But it's hard to tell an owner that when you've spent three straight top 10 picks on skill positions that weren't the quarterback. That's something you do when you feel confident you're going to make the playoffs. And it's not that they had a losing record. I don't even think it's necessarily that they didn't make the playoffs, but it's because it became a story. Like, you spent the entire year being antagonistic to the press about who you were and weren't playing. You spent the entire year like whinging about fantasy football people complaining.
Yeah.
And then even when you do finally listen to the fantasy people and start getting the ball to your guys more, you still keep losing. You're wishy-washy. Like you insisted you could get this done with Desmond Ritter, that you were like he was the guy you wanted to run this. You basically gave up on him two different times during the season. And you're final capper, as we say, the main goal is to not be embarrassed. You embarrassed yourself by throwing a temper tantrum
Big
at
time.
another coach, who it turns out wasn't even at fault for that. He
Yeah.
wasn't even the guy who decided to run that play. That was just Jameis being Jameis.
Yeah. No.
And I really do think any hope he could have had of being like, hey, look, at the end of the day, I was wrong about Desmond, but let me get the quarterback and we can make it work. That I think that was the plug where it's like, I can't let this man decide who we're drafting with that pick anymore. We need a
Yeah.
quarterback.
No. I. I'm curious to see who they pick up as a head coach because there's a lot of talent there.
Yes, I do think of the, and we'll talk about this as this is probably one of the one or two best options. I think, especially because I don't think you have to draft a quarterback necessarily. I do think there are a couple options of guys you can pick up. Like again, I do love the owner has to justify. Well, we still didn't want Lamar Jackson, but like, are you telling me if you got Justin Fields here, he couldn't make it work? You couldn't at least make the playoffs with all this.
Yeah, they have so much. They have an extended amount of talent, and it's kind of funny when things don't work out, like for them, because it's just like, how you're a solid. You've got like Bijan Robinson, definitely a great running back,
Mm-hmm.
and you've blown it. And then the temper
Yeah,
tantrum, I feel like, was the stamp on his coffin of he might have been able to get away with it if he didn't throw the temper tantrum, the very public temper tantrum. Sorry, the very
yeah.
public explicit temper tantrum.
Yes, that he pushed. If he had just yelled at the coach, he might have been able to get away with it. But throwing a fit during the press conference, I'm just like, yeah, I wouldn't. I
Yeah,
wouldn't. I wouldn't want him as my coach either. Like, it's just a bad look. This whole
yeah.
season's been a bad look.
It he put a very bad stamp on his like the last chance final moments theoretically. Say they were going to fire him beforehand, but it's like now let's look how he ended things and just go, oh, do we really want to deal with that? Like Bill Belichick has got like a freaking pedigree longer than I think everybody actively playing in the NFL.
And he's going to probably get let go by the end of this week.
Yeah, but he's going to be picked up very quickly.
Yes, exactly. This
Cuz
guy, I don't know. He'll probably make it as an offensive coordinator again, which is
minimum
probably where he belongs.
he's got if he doesn't get a head coach spot, which I'd be rather surprised by. Well,
Yeah, I think he's got to be in the
if he
doghouse for
just
a bit.
doesn't choose to outright retire, put him at either coordinator spot, and he's done. He's there.
Yeah, I mean, I don't know. It is like, well, I'm talking about Arthur Smith here, but
Arthur
like
Smith
for Arthur,
is. I think he's out.
I mean, I think he could get another offensive coordinator job, but I do think a lot of teams are going to think like, hey, maybe he was good in Tennessee just because he had Derrick Henry at his peak, AJ Brown who was
Hmm.
rising, and Ryan Tannehill for those like 3 years where he was really locked in.
Yeah.
Um,
Hot
next
take.
one up.
Hold on. Hot take. Art Smith goes to college football.
Honestly, he probably fit in better there, like because that place is for nepo babies and yeah, he would. I think he would be a lot happier there, where he can cherry pick who he wants and be weird about like
Hmm.
who's playing. You're right. I mean, Alabama just opened up inexplicably,
Yeah.
but no, no, he that would be so funny. Go from Nick Saban, the embodiment of like stability and like being a leader of men, to Arthur Smith, and just the program goes up in flames. I can't. Oh, please, no! God wouldn't let something that funny happen. He wouldn't. Second up, Ron Rivera of Washington. This truly was like the sort of like dead duck, or what's the lame duck? This was the
Yeah.
most lame duck position in the NFL, where they could have probably fired him the minute the paperwork was signed before the season for the new ownership, and I would have been like, yeah, that tracks. Um,
This is one like I don't know if the like Washington had a very poor performance
mhm.
like the vast majority of the season, especially when I click on the completely wrong team to look up how like Washington's games more in depth. Um, like not a lot of wins. They were the ones that gave the Bears their first win. They they've done some pretty like they gave the Giants a couple of wins, which Giants really didn't deserve a couple wins. Um, and they were lucky if they can score more than like I'm actually as I'm looking at this like the last what is this 8 games 2 3 5 of the last 8 games for them they scored more they scored 20 points or less
Woof. And
or
it
six
really,
sorry 6 of the last 8 and I don't think they scored over like they haven't scored over 30 points since they last played the Eagles in October.
yeah, again, truly just like, I mean, it begins and ends with Sam Howell. It really was like he knew he was a lame duck, thought he could save his job by being like, well, give me a chance to develop Sam Howell. Like, let's see what we got in the kid. And then when
Mm-hmm.
it was so bad, like it just was too bad to overcome. And like the refusal to pull the plug earlier. Again, I maintain if Jacoby Brissett got to play half these games, they at least would have competed for a playoff spot. They at least would have fought for that last playoff spot, and he might have been able to save his job. But the combination of being a lame duck to begin with this weird stubbornness about Sam Howell, and just the general lack of vibes, really just did him in. Like he was one of those guys who you probably could have talked ownership into firing 2 years ago. Like Dan Snyder probably could have gotten away with firing him. Just that's how long this has been overdue. And
Mm-hmm.
I would actually argue, I actually think of all the positions in terms of the teams who have open coaching jobs, as of right now, obviously there'll be a couple more. Like, the ones that aren't listed here in terms of the coaches that were fired, who fired during the season, like, I'm not a big fan of the Chargers position because I feel a lot of money that franchise is just cursed, and you're going to immediately have people up your butt because it's like you have to save Justin Herbert's career. Um, I don't know about the Falcons because again, you're not just because it's like not the most marquee location to go to, but
Yeah.
Washington, like again, people forget. For decades, Washington was considered the premier franchise of the NFL. They
It
had
was
one
a
of the most
top one, yeah.
successful. Exactly. They had a huge successful run. And like before the Panthers existed, before the Falcons, before the Jaguars existed, before the Tennessee Titans existed, they were the only team for miles before the Ravens existed. They were just the one team for basically the entire Southeast Atlantic and most of Florida. Like if you somehow and like those fans have gutted it out through these shit years. Like they have absolutely put on a brave face for all of the quiet and loud indignities of Dan Snyder. If you somehow turn this around, you're made. You're like a made man. Not only that, but you do have talent. Like again, Brian Robinson, Antonio Gibson, great running back pair, a perfectly adequate offensive line. Like I know they gave up a lot of sacks, but at the end of the day, I'm putting that more on Sam Howell than the
Mm-hmm.
offensive line. The wide receiver core's got two or three guys who are pretty good. Like it's not a lack of talent; it was a lack of bare minimum quarterback competency.
Yeah.
And you have the second pick. You have like a top two pick in this draft that is considered like two franchise changing guys are available. Perfect. You're going to get at least one of them. No one can. Only one team can trade in front of you.
Yeah, no, it's kind of crazy. It's just
Like
I yeah, no. I feel like Ron Rivera was I don't know what the best way to describe it outside of like he was going to get fired right away and then they're just like
yeah,
let's wait for the end of the season.
yeah. Why not? And that
And
I mean, again, it's like we have like 12 other things we need to do.
yeah.
So I guess he can stay and collect paycheck. I mean, I guess he'd
Mhm.
collect the paychecks if he was fired, but actually work to get paychecks.
Yeah.
Um,
All right. So, another on the list, Mike Vrabel. I want to save the most crazy for last.
yeah. Well, this one is pretty crazy.
It's pretty
Like,
crazy, but I feel like it's not the craziest of them.
oh, I agree with that. Yeah, it's an interesting one because it's like, if you were to tell me this would happen, I'd be like, well, that's not impossible. It just seems unlikely. The Tennessee Titans have been in this weird place where they've kind of needed to blow it up for a bit and just haven't really been able to. He is look, he's a very good coach who's gotten the most out of his teams. They've been consistently in the playoffs. They got the number one seed at one point. They went to an AFC title. But like the minute they traded AJ Brown away, just sort of the franchise was never in sync because
Yeah.
you can tell Mike Vrabel did not want. He famously like got up and looked like he had to dog away. Um, like he looked like he had to put his dog down. He was so distraught about trading AJ Brown. Um, he ends up getting the GM fired and kind of quickly puts together this team this year. They kind of overperformed this year, really. Like if you were to tell me they would have gotten the number one overall pick, I wouldn't have thought that would be crazy. But at the same time, it's like look, this team is changing one way or the other. Derrick Henry is probably leaving this offseason. You don't really have a marquee wide receiver. DeAndre Hopkins is probably leaving. This was absolutely Ryan Tannehill's last ride with the team.
Yeah.
Like, it kind of makes sense to just say, you know what, let's just start clean, complete franchise refresh, bring in someone new with a new vision for how this goes. Mike Vrabel, your vision was very good, but that vision is over. And for me, the question, and he's who I was talking about, where it's like, do does Robert Kraft really want to start over with a brand new, basically a brand new Patriots organization, or does he just want to keep the Patriot way going and bring Mike Vrabel in? Because here's the thing: if they bring Mike Vrabel in, I actually think they could, like, they're not going to compete for the playoffs
Oh
next year,
yeah.
but they are going to get up to like respectability really, really fast. If only because like he's a guy who players respond to really well, and he's been able to elevate mediocre talent.
Yeah. I'm yeah. There's a reason that the Eagles use them as like a freaking farm team basically with
Mm-hmm.
Vrabel as coach. But I'm not worried. Like Ron Rivera and Art Smith, kind of worried about specifically their NFL level careers. I'm not including like any other possible like
Coordinator,
college
like smaller
coach.
potato
Yeah,
position.
but Mike Vrabel, I feel like with the amount of openings there are, should have a very easy time.
Right. I will say also there was discussion that they were going to try and trade Mike Vrabel, see if another team wanted him, and get like an easy second or first round pick out of it.
Hmm.
But they decided that was too complicated. And I'm sorry, you could have gotten a first or second round pick for this guy. What are we doing here?
Oh, they could have easily especially like someone from the Panthers or something, where they're
Mm-hmm.
in my opinion, desperate need of getting a new coach.
Right. You already traded how many draft picks to the Bears? You might as well double down and get a coach.
Yeah. So
Yeah, no. I just think that's bad franchise management by the Titans' part. That's the part that's worse than getting rid of him. Like, don't
yeah,
compound a bad decision with more bad decision.
but alas,
Um,
they did.
yes. And alas, one of the great Titans of our league is now also fired.
Insane.
Pete Carroll was let go this morning. Again, they chose their words very carefully, but Pete Carroll's genuinely like it got me a little bit emotional interview
Yeah.
clearly laid it out that he was being let go. People were not expecting this. Like people who were in the know with
Yeah.
the Seahawks organization were like, obviously they're in a weird crossroads, but they're going to let Pete see it out. They're going to
Yeah.
let him sort of
Pete Carroll
decide.
saying in interviews up until including the 24 hours beforehand, yeah, I plan on staying on as head coach. Like I don't plan on leaving anytime soon. Yada yada yada. Words, words, words. Jargon.
Right. And like he was candid, like at the end of the day, they didn't do this was a year where it felt like there was an opening for them to make the playoffs. And the fact that another NFC West team got in before them, I think is
That
just
was the
very hard to
kicker.
stomach. Yeah. It's like it's one thing to not make the playoffs in a crowded NFC, but the fact that the Rams somehow slipped past you is very hard. And if I had to guess why they made this decision, it really is just like, look, he's the second oldest coach in the NFL. And like this team is kind of locked into this, his vision of the team is kind of locked into what it was. Like, you know, Gino's locked in for a little bit, Kenneth Walker's locked in, your wide receiver squad is locked in for a bit, and your defense continues to be adequate but not adequate enough. And I think it really is like we need to change, this vision of the team is never going to be able to get over the 49ers, so we need to come up with a new plan. And do you really
Yeah.
want to ask a 70-year-old man to come up with like a brand new vision for the franchise at his age? And I
Yeah.
guess the answer, unfortunately, was no. Like, I don't know. Like, again, I understand. I will say I sympathize with the decision, but I do not empathize with the decision because he truly is one of the great coaches.
Great
And
description.
unlike Belichick, the team wasn't collapsing. He's still making, their
No.
draft picks are still good. They're
Yeah.
getting good players in them. They're doing well. They're
It's
competing. Just wasn't quite good enough.
it's a matter of they. It's not them. I think the best way to I can think of is it's not them losing. It's them not winning, which is
Mm,
what's doing it. And when you play high caliber teams like the current iteration of the 49ers and stuff, I won't I'm not their biggest fans, but I won't deny it's a high caliber team.
mm,
And it's just you gotta I think you described it best where it's you analyze that's a tough competition and you analyze it and it's just what you clearly have been doing for years isn't working against them anymore. So if you
right,
want to put something on the table, you're gonna have to try either rework the wheel or try somebody new.
right. Again, it's and I don't necessarily love that logic as far as team building goes because you know a part of the reason why the Bills have been screwed the last couple of years is because they were mindlessly chasing the Chiefs and then discovered their team was too like finesse to compete against the Bengals.
Yeah.
But like again, I understand it in the broad sense of like this was a disappointing year. Something had to change, and so much of the rosters are in. You had to pick something else. I will say, like Pete Carroll is kind of one of it's funny because
He's
like
so
so much of our
entertaining.
yeah, it's funny because our generation kind of defines him as the guy who like amscrayed from USC when shit hit the fan. Like
Hmm.
his blatant disregard for the rules of college football came to a head, and Reggie Bush had to give his Heisman back, which it is funny just because it's like, yeah, he got in a lot of hot water for that, but then they changed the rules to make his way of doing things okay. Um, but yeah, like you listen to him and it truly is, you're like, oh, I get why the Seahawks love him. I get why the Seahawks fans love him. He is like a hokey, sentimental guy who means everything he says and has a very healthy way of looking at the world and at looking at the sport. He is like the reverse John Gruden, where everything is correctly in perspective and he has endless empathy. And it really does suck that, like, I don't. He says he wants to keep coaching, but again, he's 70. There's only a handful of positions that
Yeah.
really make sense for him. Like, maybe he's the guy to go. If there's one guy who can maybe break the Chargers curse, maybe it's him. I don't really know where else he wants to go. And, like, I do think we're going to underrate his
He wants to be
position.
a
It was what.
coordinator in Philly. How does that sound?
I
Please.
mean, certainly, my God, he would save the vibes. That's for sure. And I do really think we underrate how great his run with the Seattle Seahawks is.
Oh,
Like,
it's in,
so much of it gets masked. Yeah, so much of it gets masked because they end up losing to the Patriots because they don't hand the ball off. But, like, they were competing, they were basically winning at least one playoff game a year. They were in the NFC title, like, they were in the NFC title game for like 4 straight years. The
yeah.
Seahawks 49ers rivalry was one of the best in the league. And yeah, they should have won 2 Super Bowls and like had the one of the 3 or 4 greatest defenses in NFL history.
Yeah, like let's not sleep on that era with like Marshawn Lynch and stuff. But
Mm-hmm.
it's I think out of all the coaches that don't affect me directly, this was the toughest one. So like out of all the coaches,
Oh
actually,
yeah,
so like this season, none of the as of right now, none of the coaches being fired directly affected me. Technically, Ron Rivera, but also it really didn't do anything. Um,
right.
but this one, I was just like, I think Danny dropped the news, and I was like, shenanigans, like no way, like legitimate distraughtness.
Yeah, it just sucks. It really sucks. And again, like I still really like the Seahawks, and I do think they still have a relatively bright future. It's just a bummer that it had to end like this.
Yeah,
Um, Especially, I don't know. Part of me does wonder, like, well, no. I kind of want, I'm going to be honest, of all the teams I originally wanted CJ Stroud to go to, the Seahawks were number one. And, like, I'm glad he instead is getting to make another franchise competitive, but, like, I don't know. I digress. Shall we head on to our notes?
we shall. It was backup week.
Yes.
A lot of
Truly,
teams, yeah, a lot of teams started their backups and they played like backups.
yeah. Baltimore basically was all backup, still almost beat the Steelers. I will say we don't have this listed in our playoff discussion, but like I kind of wanted to just play the Dolphins again in the playoffs because like I don't like playing teams whose only explanation for making the playoffs is dark magic.
Yeah,
Where it's like, I don't know, they just get here, and I'm like, I don't like that because then anything can happen. I like controlled systems.
yeah,
Um, yes, the Browns and Bengals game was all backups and a weirdly like entertaining game despite being 31-14.
yeah.
Uh,
It had like it had like a razzle dazzle effect of a game.
right. Um, Chargers, Los Angeles was mostly backups, partially due to the Chargers backups or starters all being hurt. The Eagles game became a backups game
Oh my god, yeah.
because all hell broke loose.
My one saving grace from just absolutely destroying everything that I own that night was they very quickly like things started shit started hitting the fan for them and they very quickly decided let's just throw in all the backups and play like
Right.
that and still kind of maybe not hold their own but they didn't allow a complete blowout like that so
Yeah,
I'll take it.
yeah.
That's one of those things that it's like, you know what? I'll just take it. I'll take what I can get.
I mean, I suppose one of the upsides to having a week 18 is just at the bare minimum, at least it lets a lot of guys who might play. And like it is generally good for the league that guys get opportunities.
Yeah, no, it was very much a talent showcase thing. Something I saw was Jake Browning, the backup quarterback to Joe Burrow. He said he believes he is a top 32 quarterback, which in
All
this,
right, let's. Well,
I feel
yeah,
like
there's
in
been a
this
lot of bad
post,
quarterbacks this year.
this post, like Joe Burrow being out for injury thing,
Hmm.
it's like, you know what, you're kind of holding your own a little bit. But then he also followed it up with, yeah, I might be like a top 32, but I'm playing behind a top 5, so obviously I'm going to be the backup. And it's just like, all right, he's like a hint arrogant, but gets the message in the end.
Hmm.
So I kind of give him a little bit of a pass for that.
Right, right. Um,
Here's your one arrogant allowed, and it's just like, all right, cool.
Moving on to our question of the week. Here's a fun one I thought for the end of the year. So, fantasy football up. Um, I believe I was fourth in our comedy league and third or fourth in our main league, embodying the Midtown Mids perfectly. Um, and my question is, what did you learn from fantasy football this year? Are there any big lessons you took away from this season that you want to apply when you get around to voting next year, only to forget them?
Um, yeah. So learned a lot. Sure, we'll say that. The biggest change in my strategy was having a lower draft pick. I had the first overall pick in our one league,
Mm-hmm.
and that was like that's our money league. And what I learned is you can draft two kickers before anyone else drafts a single one, and you can kind of be competitive.
I
So
like it.
I didn't really learn any lessons.
You know what? I respect that.
Like there's so much ever changing and
Mm-hmm.
so much up in the air. Like from a theoretical sense, Kenny Mack should, because he had the second pick and I picked Justin Tucker first. He picked Justin Jefferson and he came in eighth place.
Yeah, there
I
is.
beat him in the
Look, there's so
playoffs.
much random shit about this. Like, I mean, I guess mine, like, I don't know. I try to get at least one truism or sort of one, like, fable esque lesson from every year. And this one is absolutely you just want the number one receiver on teams. No more of this number two on a good team or number one on a bad team. Do not screw around. You
Yeah.
want, like, yeah, if you want us to at least one Stephon Diggs, you want at least one CD Lamb, like, you want
You want
the
Christian
guy.
McCaffrey.
Right. Well, you want Christian McCaffrey, but assuming you can't get that, um, yeah, that's my biggest lesson because I tried to make it work this year with like Jalen Waddle, Terry McLaurin. Like I was really patching it together with like where it's like, well, they're not the number one guy on their team, or their team's not very good, but like they'll get a lot of catches due to like volume, and it's like,
Yeah.
nope, not this year, buddy. Um, and yeah, I'm not screwing around with that anymore because it is so like the Washington Redskins almost killed me this year because of that bull crap. Did I say Redskins again?
You
God damn it.
100% said Redskins. I was going to call you out on it too, but you call yourself.
God damn it. Washington commies.
There you go.
Um, God damn it. My apologies, our First Nations listeners.
Also,
Yeah.
learned another thing about it. Don't take any advice from Colin. He lost 2 years in a row.
Yep. Bottom, baby. Woo! And he was giving me a hard time about how I approach things.
He lost to what could only equate to be considered the Washington Commanders and the Carolina Panthers of our leagues. Me and Callum, Team Caspod, and we were his final two games in playoffs. I sent him to the loser bracket, and then Callum won the loser bracket, like the loser game.
Yes. Um, a guy who knows nothing about football, truly set it and forget it.
Yep.
Hilarious. Also, lesson learned: if a guy had a week 7, do not draft them. I told myself that it would be fine. That Tony Pollard broke his leg. It was his leg. But that one should have been self-evident. Shall we move on to next week?
All right, so next week it is playoff time.
Yes. Shall we list off the matchups?
We shall. All right,
I'm pulling them up
I
right now.
got
I
it
should
right
have
here.
made sure I had. Thank you. I should have made
So
sure I had them before that.
Saturday, 4:30, Browns Texans. Sounds like a good
Fun
game.
game.
Saturday, 8 p.m., Dolphins Chiefs. Solid game. gonna be cold when I hear it though. Sunday at 1 p.m. Steelers Bills. Sunday 4:30 Packers Cowboys. Sunday night Rams Lions. Monday night Eagles Bucks.
A honestly a really good collection of games in terms of like what we could have hoped for in terms of playoff matchups. It kind of the seeding kind of fell the way we would have wanted it to. This there was a lot of crazy scenarios, who could jump up and who could jump down. Kind
Yeah,
of fits. I couldn't think of better matchups for each team.
I think I think there's some matchups though. It's like Dolphins Chiefs are two very dominant teams in the conference. Makes
Mm,
sense. Lions Rams, Matt Stafford and Jared Goff, like the trade they did for them. Matt Stafford finally gets to play a playoff game in Detroit. Sure, he's on the
mm.
Rams, but um,
Yeah,
like those are really fun. Browns Texans, very excited for as I mentioned because it's like how much of an effect is C.J. Stroud versus Davis Mills because they lost. Browns won in Christmas Eve because they played with Davis Mills. How much is the rookie gonna be against that?
mm.
Um, Eagles Bucks, two teams that have no right to be in the playoffs, are in it and playing each other. Packers Cowboys, I feel like that's a very much a David and versus Goliath scenario. And
Indeed.
then Steelers Bills, I feel like it's kind of like the opposite of Eagles Bucks, where Eagles Bucks, it's like how did you two make it, especially with how you've played the last couple of weeks, looking at both teams there. But Steelers Bucks or Steelers Bills, it is like two teams that have like fought their way to the end to get in.
Truly a brutal gauntlet. I've aged like 45 years. Still look amazing.
hmm And there
Um,
are three NFC North teams in the playoffs this season. Insane.
yes, I believe that is the first. Plus, because all the teams ended up having winning records, which I believe is the first time that's happened since the 30s,
Yeah,
if I
like
double check.
1930 something or other. It's insane.
Yes, truly good for them. Good for everyone. Again, the only like shaky team is the Steelers, but at least they have like again dark magic on their side,
Yeah.
where it's like, oh, they clearly made a pact with a warlock. They'll come to collect eventually, but for now, they get to be in the playoffs and maybe upset the Bills. Um, on the other end of the spectrum, we also have our locked-in final draft order
Yep.
for the non-playoff team. So drafting number one is the Chicago Bears via the Carolina Panthers.
There it
Woof.
is.
They have a tough decision ahead of them. The Washington Commies, the New England Patriots, the Arizona Cardinals, the Los Angeles Chargers, the New York Giants, the Tennessee Titans, the Atlanta Falcons, the Chicago Bears, and wrapping up the top 10 is the New York Jets at 10. Not wait to see them trade that for Devontae Adams and not the offensive lineman they desperately need. So Aaron
Yep.
Rodgers gets beat up again. I am very excited to start talking draft. It's a very like it's the positions you want to have a lot of guys, wide receiver and quarterback. There's a very real chance we have another year where quarterbacks go 1, 2, 3 because Jalen Daniels is. A lot of people are talking themselves into Jalen Daniels, the LSU Heisman winner. A super athletic,
hmm
tall guy. A little bit of a question about this. He went through the transfer portal, and there's a lot of questions why it took him getting to LSU in this final year to step up. Um, we have a couple like possible spoilers with Michael Penix, who had a rough final game, but leading up to that, he was giving
Yeah.
me some Stroud energy in terms of like sneaky athletic, like reads the pocket perfectly and throws these moon shots. And JJ McCarthy, the Michigan quarterback, who is now inexplicably getting first round talk, has a very big Mac Jones energy about him, but
hmm
at least he didn't throw to a Heisman. Um, yeah, we have a couple teams who go receiver. Particularly, I'm excited for Marvin Harrison and Malik Nabers from LSU. It's going to be a fun draft season. I won't get
It's
too into it now,
yeah.
obviously, but we
We're
have
gonna have
plenty
a
of time to
draft
talk about
special
it.
later.
Oh yes, I definitely want to do more research on some of the like less exciting positions because I think this is a fun little draft. I think
Yeah.
we're going to see some weird shit.
We're I think I'm excited. I'm more excited. Like I'm excited for this draft. I'm excited because all these top 10 teams are teams that need good picks. And like years past, there's been like some trading around and stuff, and people trade their first round picks to like better teams for people and stuff like that. But like there's none established as of right now. Like Chicago Bears, like Carolina traded to the Bears for it, but that means nothing because the Bears
Hmm.
are also in a team in need.
Right.
So I'm
I
excited.
I
Yeah,
yeah. So much of this draft will be decided by what the Bears decide to do. Because if they trade it to, like, New England could conceivably trade up if they really want to have the first pick of the litter. But, like, Vegas really wanted CJ Stroud last year. If they say, screw it, we're paying any price to get the quarterback this time around, if the Saints do that, like,
yeah,
all hell could break loose. And I'm very excited at that
you know.
possibility.
But we'll talk about it more later. But it's like these top 10 teams all need like have blatant weaknesses that they should draft for. But somebody's gonna trade for picks, and I want to know how that goes.
Hmm. Um, yes. And moving on. So for this playoffs, we have a new category for games
Yep.
called biggest upset potential because it's like, there's no games you sleep on during the playoffs. There's
Yeah.
like five. All of
The,
them matter.
there's like 5 games. They all matter, and they all have their own individual time slots. So it's like, what is the point of having a don't sleep on game and a don't bother game?
Hmm.
You got one pick, like one option to watch at each time slot. There's no point.
Exactly.
So the biggest upset potential is kind of you the one team that beats like typically the higher ranking team, that if this team like everyone's pet everyone's betting on the team that I guess loses in the scenario, and it's just like even the other teams are like, all right, we have to prep for like this team, and then all of a sudden you don't have to prep for that team anymore, and it's just like, what do we do now?
Hmm.
So I'll go first to help explain the point and premise better. So I said that the biggest upset potential is the Green Bay Packers beating Dallas. Dallas has been a top tier team all season, and we've gone into detail about the Packers this episode a lot. So
Yes.
if the Packers theoretically should not be winning that game, I would say they have at most a 25% chance of winning. But that would be like people are going to be prepped for Dallas, people aren't going to be prepped for Green Bay. So
Yes.
if the Packers win, that is a monkey wrench thrown on the NFC side of the conference to specifically, I think they would, yeah, they're the 7 team, so they would be playing San Fran,
Ooh.
and
And yeah,
that they're
it's a
gonna have
game.
David
Yep.
and Goliath.
Right. And like it feels like a game that, like, this is the highest the Cowboys have been in quite a long time. They finally got the division. The vibes are good. This is the best Dak Prescott's ever played. Knowing the sort of history of Dallas Cowboys in the playoffs, specifically with Mike McCarthy, this feels like they could blow this. Um, and the consequences for that actually would be kind of cosmic because let's just say the Dallas Cowboys coaching position opens up and Jerry Jones
It
says,
won't.
screw it. I mean, yeah, they'll probably keep Mike McCarthy around because Jerry Jones likes having someone he can boss around. But hypothetically, that suddenly becomes a very appealing job. And yeah, if Jordan Love is going to set his legacy up with the Packers early, this is the game to do it.
Yeah, this would be a great start to his career with the Packers.
Hmm. Um, Speaking of another game with a lot of kind of like legacy potential, mine is the Los Angeles Rams versus the Detroit Lions. The matchup we were kind of hoping for when like the sort of vague images of the playoffs came into view.
Mm-hmm.
Um, two high-powered offenses, two like kind of elite offenses and ho-hum defenses. This could be a shoot 'em up. This could be a shootout. And more importantly, it is not only Matthew Stafford returning to Detroit to play his old team. It is also Jared Goff possible revenge game against Sean
On
McVay.
yeah,
Sean McVay kind of sort of subtextually throwing him under the bus for that Super Bowl loss by trading for a older, more veteran quarterback. And Jared Goff, who has since kind of evolved, he's kind of improving on himself, and like truly, either win here is kind of cool. Like Jared Goff gets to like sort of redeem himself, kind of gets to prove himself, and like upset his old team, or Matthew Stafford comes in and upsets this like golden year for the Detroit Lions. I think this is going to be a very tense game because Lion fans were already conflicted about him winning the Super Bowl. If you remember, people were wearing Detroit Rams shirts
yeah.
to celebrate Stafford getting the Super Bowl. If he comes in and like he just has like 2 touchdowns in the first quarter, everyone's going to get tight. Like the vibes have been great for the Lions for most of this year, but like at the first sign that this thing could go haywire, I say this as a Bills fan, like I think the first minute things start going wrong, like you just start going, oh, here we fucking go. This is always how it goes, and all hell could break loose.
That's gonna be very insane. These are gonna be fun games to watch.
Oh yeah.
All right.
And our second category is
So I have like 9 different names for this category.
yes, I like tit for tat or fire.
Yeah.
Or like Fire Watch maybe, and that's like a fun play on. Yeah, it's like a fun play on
Overwatch.
What's the word? Well, I was gonna say on like actual Firewatch people who work in the woods, but also that.
Yeah. So this one, it's more of the anything you could do, I could do better kind of game. Mm-hmm. Team A scores, Team B returns with a score. Team B gets an interception. Team A gets an interception. It's a real tit for tat kind of situation where
Indeed.
It's going to be decided within the final. It should be decided within the final 2 minutes.
Right. Whoever gets the ball last very well could be the guys who pull it off.
Yeah, it's also theoretically a game that the first half is going to mean absolutely nothing. The second half is where everything matters.
Correct.
So I said Miami versus Kansas City. These are 2 very top level teams. They're both like no one can deny these are bad. Like these aren't bad teams, and they played this season on November 5th, which was week 10-ish or week 9, I think, and it was a 1-score game. In Kansas City Chiefs 21, Miami Dolphins 14.
Mm-hmm.
So it doesn't have to be a very high scoring game for this, but it is going to be somebody setting the bar, somebody trying to beat the bar, back and forth all night long. And I think this is like the perfect change where it's like, all right, they played in Kansas City in early November, so it's still like not cold yet. And now they're going to play in the freaking Frostbite Bowl.
Yes. I was kind of concerned because both of these offenses are kind of slumping in different ways. It's going to be cold as hell. They're not going to be able to pass it really well. But then I thought about it and I'm like, what has actually worked for both of these teams consistently? And I was like, oh, right, the run game. Yeah. Like, again, the Dolphins were running all over the Bills in that game. For some reason, they just pivoted off the run. And the Chiefs, like, is Isaiah Pacheco an elite running back? No, but he's a pretty good one. And, like, when he's locked in, there's few guys more annoying to deal with. And I do think this could be an inexplicably super fun, like, both teams run for 200 yards, a little bit of snow, like, people just sliding around. Yeah. It could get retro football really fast.
Yeah, that's what makes it exciting. I feel like earlier season game, teams were close and fair-ish conditions. Later season game, it could still be close, but you're going to be in brutal conditions. This is how
Oh yeah.
this is what I think. Like either Week 18 or the playoffs should be minus the Super Bowl, where it is like you are being put through the ringer of conditions. I'm not saying like injuries and stuff because there have been hard hits and all that stuff since they last played.
Hmm.
Tyreek Hill missed some games and all that stuff, and like the Super Bowl should be played in the most pristine conditions possible. Like
Yes.
I'd be all for them setting up a Super Bowl like specific stadium instead of like I know they'll never stop the traveling around thing, but if they do like a Super Bowl specific stadium in like the middle of nowhere, like Kentucky or Missouri or something like no, that Kansas City's
Right.
Missouri. But like Nebraska, somewhere where it's just like here's like pretty dead center. We are going to build an elite level stadium. It's going to have a dome. It's going to be climate controlled where you can play in the most pure conditions possible.
Okay. I'm kind of vibing with this. I'm kind of vibing with this idea.
Yeah.
Like, look, I like them moving it around, and I like cold weather being an option, but I kind of like the idea of like a super villained
Yeah.
giant facility where they always have the Super Bowl. I will say, like, look, Dolphins fans and like are right to be a little aggrieved that it's like, okay, it's actually dangerous to be out here. Why are we doing this?
Oh, I
But at the
can
same
yeah.
time,
I can fully
these
respect that.
motherfuckers tell us to shut up about them literally cheating their stadium so that the opposing team is in 100-degree temperatures in
Yeah.
like the early fall. Like, no team should be allowed to use climate change to their advantage. So don't, and you've been taking advantage of it for like a decade now. So don't even.
Yeah.
You are the only team who's not allowed to complain about this.
Yeah. The hot can only affect one team. The cold can affect both teams.
Yeah, exactly. Um, I am also going to change mine a last minute. I
Ooh.
actually think a game that could be surprisingly high scoring is Tampa Bay, Philadelphia.
Really?
Here's the thing. I think a lot of people on this coaching staff for the Eagles are playing for their jobs right now.
Oh, absolutely.
Like,
They all
or
are.
at least, or at least the
They're
explicit understanding that like you could be mid-season firings next year. Like you won't
yeah.
get a grace period of another whole season if things aren't going perfectly.
You
I
do
think
good, you either keep your job or can get an offer from a different place. You do bad, you do not coach for another 365 days.
right. And I do think, like, if there was a time when they're finally going to drop, like, all pretense and just lean into what worked last year, because again, as Bill Simmons pointed out, it's like, it's so weird that it's so hard for the Eagles this year. And I think they're just overthinking it because it's like, they kind of have like four unstoppable plays Jalen Hurts sweep, tush push, AJ Brown slant, run it, like, basically any route AJ Brown runs, honestly,
Yeah.
and like three or four things Devontae Smith can do on any given route. Um, and they just don't. So I think this is the time they break out all the stops. Meanwhile, Baker is also kind of playing for his job. This is like a feel-good story for him, despite how crappy that final game was. Playing, you know, playing himself as into a starting quarterback, like branding again. And like I think they're just going to come out and sling it and take advantage of this Eagles defense being basically like whatever was working has now completely collapsed
Yes.
under Matt Patricia. I truly do not know why you thought the backwash of New England's like Patriot way would be your solution. The guy who gave up 500 yards to Nick Foles, the guy who had people openly
Yeah.
rebelling against him in Detroit, to the point the day he got fired, players were tweeting about like, how's that Patriot way working out for you? Like, anywho, I actually think this could be surprisingly high scoring, and both teams just being like, well, let's just swing it.
Yeah. So, exciting football games coming up. We've got
Yes.
a bunch of fun weeks ahead, and it's going to be interesting. Also, who gets fired next? We'll all find out together.
Oh, yes, we'll have to add that to the schedule next week. But until then, shall I send them?
Send us home, Carter.
Thank you guys all for listening for the entire regular season, and we cannot wait to give you all of our opinions, all of our scoops, all of our insider trade secrets for this playoff run. But until then, I'm Carter,
I'm Kevin.
and let's go to the Super Bowl.